Hey guys, and welcome to our biggest episode yet. It's Driving with Doug episode 2, Simpson Desert episode. We are super excited. We're heading out to the three corners of the Queensland state, Poeppel Corner, Cameron Corner, and Haddon's Corner, and it's going to be one heck of an adventure. We've got huge distance to cover, 4,500 kilometres in just over 2 weeks. It's going to be a cracker. We've teamed up with the Wheel Life 4-Wheel Drive Club for this one. We're super excited to hit the road. Let's go, guys. We hope you enjoy it.
Well, here we are, guys, at the start of our next big epic adventure. We are heading out to the three Queensland state corners. That's going to take us right out into the Simpson Desert. We're going to duck into South Australia. We're going to come back via some awesome tracks. We're going to have a great time. We've teamed up with the Wheel Life 4-Wheel Drive Club for this adventure. They're a great bunch of blokes. We've got about 11 cars in total joining us. We can't wait to get out there and check out this awesome country.
So starting from Brisbane, we've got a 4,500 kilometre return journey. Our first stop is going to be Miles, where we're going to catch up with the whole crew. From there, we're heading out to Charleville, where we're going to stay the night and then move straight on all the way out to Betoota. It's one huge drive that day, but it's going to be good fun. From Betoota, it's our last push, then out to Birdsville. And then from there, we're essentially going to head out into the Simpson Desert, heading for Poeppel Corner, and who knows what we will find. Before we head off, it's time to check the maps, buy the essential items, and then pack the van.
Righto, so on any adventure, whether or not you're taking a camper van, a caravan, or just a trailer with you, it's incredibly important that before you leave, you pack that van correctly, so that when you're on the road, you run into as least issues as possible, and that your van, trailer, or camper van is nice and stable on the road. Now, how do you do this? Well, it all starts at home with correctly packing inside your van. Now, obviously, when you're you want to start with the heavy stuff. And there's a very specific zone on any camper or trailer where you can put the heaviest items. And that is anywhere around your your two axles, or one axle, however many you have, and you want to keep that weight packed in as close to there as possible. Next, we're looking at our medium weight items. Now, if you draw a line across the bottom floor of the van, anywhere down low in the van is suitable for storing medium weight items. And then your lightweight items across the top. Another thing you don't want to do is position heavy items too far behind or in front of your axles. This can cause your van to become very unstable on the road, and it can lead to nasty trailer sway, which could cause an accident. This van here is fitted with tong boxes on the rear, and they're probably one of the most handy storage parts on the whole van. You can kind of just chuck anything you want in these, or they're perfectly sized for a generator. But you might actually want to think again before you go about putting your super heavy items this far back on the van. Even though we're quite low down, heavy items like fuel or a generator could cause instability on the road. Those same exact principles apply to inside your van as well. Heavier items down in the lower cupboards, and then lighter items in the higher cupboards.
You should also find on any caravan and trailer a little plate on your A-frame. It's going to tell you other important information, your tear weight, which is your dry weight, and how much you can load it up. Well, anyway, we got to Gils Weir, which was just outside of Miles, for our first night and to catch up with the crew. It's a lovely little spot. These weirs are essentially like miniature dams, and they create a perfect little environment for the local wildlife to thrive and breed. Lovely spots, nice chilly afternoon. We set up a fire and kicked back and relaxed.
So we're almost ready to head off for morning one. We've got one car with a couple of charging issues on the secondary batteries, but hopefully once we get that all sorted, we'll head off and it should be a cracker day. It's nice and cool, super clear. We've got about 5 hours driving to get out of Charleville, and then we're off from there, so looking forward to it.
The next problem was the 79 series, which started going to limp mode just outside of Miles.
So fortunately we've had our AC gear out here and we've been able to get a fault code for this Toyota. Looks like there's an issue with the turbocharger and it's throwing an overboost code. So unfortunately that could be a whole bunch of things. We're not too sure what we're going to do yet, but we'll take it one step at a time, and hopefully we don't lose one of the cars from the way so early.
No time to dawdle though. We had to keep the schedule, so we kept moving, pushing on to Charleville.
Well, there we go. It was a bit of a day. We've made it through to Charleville. There's a point in time now I was a bit worried we were actually going to lose two of our convoy in Roma. They both had to stop for mechanical reasons. The Land Cruiser because of that, what turned out to just be a sensor issue, fortunately. And the Colorado, which was having some issues with charging its batteries. I don't know if they've solved that one, but I know that the Land Cruiser is back on the road. The Colorado is with them. And they are only about half an hour behind us now. So we've all filled up at Charleville. We're just stopping here at the IGA at the moment. Food Works here, pick up a couple of supplies, and then it's about 5 k's outside of town to camp. So we've got a massive day planned tomorrow. We're heading further out west and it really starts to get quite rural from here, so we're really looking forward to it.
Well, the Evening Star Caravan Park was going to be our stop for that night, and we even had our own little patch of dirt organised for us. It was actually a really nice spot. It was lovely and cool. We had a beautiful sunset when we were setting up. And even the locals weren't bothered by our presence. They just like to sit around their little feeding spot and take it easy. We also got to check out the evening stargazing session, which I highly recommend if you're out that way. You got some awesome views of the moon through the telescope, and it was a really informative session. After a really chilly night, it was time for an early morning. We had to get up and head off to our next stop, Betoota, which was over 700 k's away. The road really opens up once you leave Charleville. You start to feel like you're getting into the outback now. One thing you will run into a lot more once you get past Charleville are road trains. They are enormous, they command a presence on the road, and they can weigh over 100 tonnes. Now, what we like to do is stay on channel 40, which is the road safety channel, and you can call these guys ahead of time when you see them coming and just let them know that you're, well, what we do anyway is we get off the road and let them go past. It's just easier for everyone. These guys are on the road all day, and it doesn't hurt to give them a bit of room. Benefits everyone. It'll also shower your car with rocks if they're halfway off the road when they come past, so it's definitely nice to get off to the side. We also took the opportunity to grab some firewood and check out where we were going. A quick stop in Quilpie as we made our way through. We were stopping at every town to grab fuel just to make sure that everyone was topped up. But after we head off, the roads opened up and the scenery changed again, and we were definitely on our way out to Betoota.
Well, there we go. This is the last bit of bitumen behind me before Birdsville. It took a lot longer than I was expecting to get this far. Well, that is this far on the bitumen anyway. But we've let our tyres down here. Just get a bit of air out of it, make it a bit more comfortable. And we're on our way to Betoota Waterhole, an old abandoned town. Should be good, let's get rolling.
These outback dirt roads definitely need to be respected. Even when they're in relatively good conditions like this, the stones can create quite slippery surfaces, they can pull your trailer around into the small ruts, and they just shake everything loose on the cars.
Fucking idiots around here.
There's also a bunch of idiots on the roads as well that have no idea what they're doing, so enjoy that. Fortunately, we were rewarded at the end of the day by one of the most incredible lookouts that I've ever seen. Betoota, we had a fantastic sunset setting on the horizon. It's a lone little pub with basically a patch of dirt out the front of to pull up and make camp at. There is also some ruins of the old Betoota town, but unfortunately we didn't have a lot of time to check those out. So once we'd set up camp, kind of sat back, and some of us hit up the pub for a bit of dinner and a drink. But it didn't take long, and we were on the road again the next morning, heading out to Birdsville. It wasn't far down the road from Betoota that we ran over the public art display, Dreamtime Surfeit. It's an amazing mural that's been constructed on the side of a hill from all of the different gravel and gibber that you can find throughout the Shire. Well, we'd made it into Birdsville in mostly one piece, and we were all pretty keen to set up our campers and caravans in the caravan park, which would be our base for our trip into the desert and the next couple of days. Not going to talk too much about Birdsville at the moment because we will be back here shortly. For now, let's hit the desert. Well, here we go. It is time. We're heading out of Birdsville into the Simpson Desert. And it's actually an extremely overcast day today. Not what I was expecting at all. We've actually got some forecasts for some rain later in the week. I don't know whether that's going to come earlier or whether it's going to, who knows what could happen. Let's find out. Here we go. We pulled over just before we made it to the first sand dune to let a bit of pressure out of our tyres and fix our sand flags, which you can see on all the cars. These are required when you're heading into the Simpson Desert. They're about 3 metres tall, and this lets other people coming over the other side of dunes have a bit of warning that your car is coming. Wow. Now, the reason for my exclamation here was seeing our first car in the convoy only make it 2/3 up the hill before completely bogging down. So I'll give it a go, but unfortunately, spoiler alert, I may have made a mistake in my first attempt. Amarok power. Keep an eye on my tachometer. You'll see why I'm having so much trouble on this hill. Reminder to self, traction control turns itself back on when you turn the car off.
Rookie mistake.
Yeah, you know, that's a fair cop. I did, should have checked those things before I hit the hill. Well, second time's a charm.
Yeah, boy!
Well, with 2 cars over, it was time for the rest of the convoy to give it a go.
Going a good thing.
And if there was one thing that we were quickly learning was that you could not mess around with these hills. These sand dunes are serious climbs, and they require the correct preparation before you start tackling them. What we started to notice pretty quickly was we were treating these sand dunes probably less like sand than we should have been. We were running about 24 to 28 psi in a lot of the cars, and it really turned out to be too high, which we quickly learnt, and after this first hill we dropped another 6 or 7 psi out of all the car's tyres. as usual, cameras do not show you how steep and how long these sand dunes are. The patrol here was literally flat foot trying to get up this and just missed the gear change, unfortunately. By the time we got to the end of the convoy, there was no messing around with speed though. All in all, after about 2 hours of off-screen recovery methods, we got all of the cars over the first sand dune, let some more pressure out of all the tyres, and kind of settled into the groove of these dunes. As you're watching these next couple of clips of me going over these dunes, there's a couple of things to notice about these Simpson Desert dunes. First thing is, obviously they're quite large, but they're also extraordinarily rutted as well. It's not like a sand dune on the beach, which is basically just a competition between your engine power and traction to see if you can get over it. Here, you've got axle twisters all the way up these hills, and it makes it incredibly challenging and incredibly hard on the car. One of the things that I was finding was I ended up just leaving my diff lock in most of the time over these hills because it really helped with the axle benders and keeping momentum and traction to the ground. A constant steady RPM in a set gear also helps get over the hills, and you've got to pick a fine line between going too fast and potentially damaging suspension components and keeping enough momentum to get through the steep, soft, rutted sections. Here is the bypass for Eyre Creek, which you can take if it's too wet. These sections of dunes are a lot lower and a lot of water pools up into them, and there's a small river that passes through there as well. This is the one that we're going through just here. Might have heard a beeping in the background, and that was Evan's HF radio. Whenever you're out in the desert, you have to be sure that you can communicate back with civilization. So we had not only satellite phones in our convoy, but we also had HF radio as well. Here we go, another bumpy one. Oh my gosh. Anyway, after a long day of driving, we found a nice little side section to pull off and set up camp for the night. Once you get out here, you really start to understand just how remote and how desolate this place is. We are so far from the next nearest group of people or civilization, and you really do start to feel it out here. So what happened, mate?
Well, mate, the Simpson Desert has destroyed my carpentry work. That's what's happened.
Nice.
Yep, a bit more practice. Go back to school when I get home.
Well, once we were all set up, it was time to sit down and have a bit of a yarn around the fire and share some of the journeys for the day.
Well, okay. Sure. Thank you. I
Although I must say,
No room for fancy caravans or cookings here, just the basics. And there was certainly plenty of life out in the desert as well.
They're a bit hard to see, but if you look around, I'm looking around going, what are all these little shining lights? Yeah, something biofluorescent. So you walk up to one. Hello, little spider.
Tell you what, Seamus, mate, rebuilding your entire back in the middle of the Simpson Desert is a good effort. Just wonder how long it's going to take you.
One eternity later.
Well, you can't really beat this to wake up to. What a cracker of a sunrise over the desert.
Well, no one planned for this. Come to one of the driest places in Australia, and just our luck, it rains. We'll see how we go. Everything is just soaked at the moment. We're trying to repack some equipment from the cars to free a bit more space up in the back of the other Amarok, take a bit more weight off the front. See how we go.
Well, there was one thing that the rain did, and that was it really changed our approach to the hills. Much like the beach, it packed the sand down, and it meant that we could take our time a lot more over the dunes, which I tell you what, our cars were thanking us for. All throughout the Simpson Desert, between the dunes are salt flats and these rivers and lakes that is where all of the rain accumulates whenever it does fall. And driving across them is certainly an experience. You can see already, though, that the rain that we'd had overnight was starting to turn these crossings into slushy-looking messes. But we were almost at Poeppel Corner, our first corner, and even though the rain was coming back again, we wanted to push through and at least check out this site. In 1880, Augustus Poeppel, a surveyor for the South Australian government, marked the corner posts between the Northern Territory, Queensland and South Australia with some eucalyptus posts that he dragged out with some camels. Now, this here isn't the original post. The original one is now in a museum, and this is a replica that's been reinstalled in its place. However, it wasn't actually surveyed in the exact correct spot the first time. So it's been resurveyed, and you'll see this new concrete pole is in the exact geological position of where the states intersect.
Well, there we go. We made it to a relatively rainy Poeppel Corner. We had some awesome scenery along the drive in across that salt lake.
The problem was now that the rain was starting to come down a lot heavier. And even though it's not much compared to when you're in the city, it only takes a very small amount of rain to completely transform the outback. We were obviously concerned that some of these salt lake crossings were starting to get a bit soft, and this is not somewhere that you want to get stuck.
So here's the situation. We pulled up for lunch on the other side of this salt lake, and it's still raining, and we think it's going to rain till about, 8-9 o'clock tonight. And most of the campers' gear is wet, because obviously when you plan to come to the Simpson Desert in the middle of winter, in one of the driest places in the country, you expect it to rain. So you pack wet weather gear, which we didn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish up this lunch, and then we're going to push on through to Birdsville. Hopefully we get there, I'm going to suggest around 10 o'clock.
It's incredible how much water started building up between these dunes, even though we'd probably only had 10 to 15 mils by this point. Our main concern at this point was if it continued to rain, whether or not we would be able to get through the Air River. So no real time to stop, we had to keep pushing on.
Oh, moly, that's slippery. Whoa.
I kid you not, the ground was basically turning into ice.
As you can probably imagine, the Simpson Desert is not typically a very wet place. It's one of the driest places in the whole continent. Receives only an average rainfall of about 150 millimeters a year, and that is usually exclusive to summer. You can't actually come into the Simpson Desert in summer anymore. Between December and February, I think it is off the top of my head, the park is closed, or December and March. Well, that's because the temperatures in the desert here can reach and exceed 50 degrees Celsius. And that's a very good way to get mechanical breakdown in your car, get stuck, not have enough water, and be in a very bad situation. Now, it's actually really quite nice traveling through the Simpson Desert at this time of year. It's quite cool. This cloud cover has been keeping the nights a bit warmer than they otherwise would be. It'd probably be getting down to around 1 or 2 degrees if it wasn't. But traveling through the day, you know, we're seeing 15 to 20 degrees. Really nice traveling weather. So yeah, having a really good time moving along.
Fortunately, Air Creek wasn't flooded, and we were able to make our way through without having to take that large bypass. Interestingly, what was unknown to us at that point was that even though we'd been receiving about 15 to 20 mils in the desert, Charleville had gotten a lot more. So we're not too sure what the conditions of these crossings would have been in a few days' time. What we do know, though, was that just after we got back into Charleville, entrance to the desert was closed off. Well, I can tell you what, driving in the afternoon in the desert was one of the most beautiful places that I've ever been. And driving in the night and in the rain is definitely an experience that I may never get again. Anyway, about an hour out of Birdsville and the rain came back with a vengeance. Visibility got really poor, and it was only sooner or later...
Stuck on the way back.
Well, there you go. My old man decided that he'd try and go between the two tracks on the dune, and it didn't end up particularly well. And with that, we'd made it back out. We were all pretty damn exhausted after that expedition, so it was time to make our way back into town and get some well-earned rest.
It looks like we're going to be stuck in Birdsville for at least today, maybe even the whole of tomorrow. One of our group was just having a chat to the local coppers. It looks pretty bad out there. Apparently there's some trucks stuck up to the axles on the Treslecki track, which is where we were going to go. So yeah, let's see how that happens. Plan C.
It was the light of the morning that really revealed just how much mud we'd managed to get on the cars. There are a few large puddles we'd even driven through on the way back into town, which had washed a lot of it off. But we had definitely not been expecting this. One benefit about all these outback towns with bore water is that most of them have a truck wash, so nothing better to wash a bit of mud off than some nice warm bore water.
Righto, so here we are in Birdsville, about 1,600 kilometres west of Brisbane. We are out as far west as you can go in this part of Queensland before you hit the Simpson Desert. Now, while we're here, I thought it would be a great place to talk about what's happening behind me here. And that is something that we call the Great Artesian Basin. Now, what is the Great Artesian Basin? Well, it's the largest underground water basin and underground water supply in the world. In fact, it's so large that it covers about 22% of the land mass of Australia. It's enormous and it holds an absolutely untapped, vast amount of water in it. And it's also the lifeblood for many communities out here. It's how they get their water supply, it's how they get their power, it's how the whole town functions. And without having these bores, these little towns simply would not exist. Now, this water's coming out from underground at close to about 100 degrees Celsius. And as you can see behind me, it's boiling out here and steaming up into the atmosphere around. It's an absolutely amazing sight to see while you're here. Now, the water that's coming out of here also is several million years old, if you would believe it. The Great Artesian Basin actually formed about 100 million years ago, when the Australian landmass was a lot lower and sea levels were a lot higher, and all of this area that now encompasses the Great Artesian Basin was actually covered by an inland sea. Now, it was only a couple of meters deep, but what happened is over time, that inland sea created a very hard bottom to the ground. So the base of the Great Artesian Basin is a large layer of sandstone that runs across the entire basin. And what happens over time and over those millions of years is that water on the surface has gathered and then has seeped down in what we call recharge zones. And they've actually filled up the ground underneath the basin. Now, hopefully I can give you a bit of a practical demonstration of how that works. And I've set up a little bit of a kind of a 6th grade science experiment to show you what it looks like in practice. So let's have a look at how this works in practice. Now, the Great Artesian Basin is an enormous area of underground water storage in places up to 3 kilometers deep. Now, as I mentioned before, the sandstone at the bottom of it, so I want you to picture the alfoil here as the sandstone. It's an impenetrable layer that the water can't get through. However, over the hundreds of thousands and millions of years that the basin has been here, a sediment layer of dirt, sand, rocks, you know, all the country that we can see around us has built up over the top of this sandstone. And that's what the water filters down to, gets trapped underneath and forms part of the basin. So hopefully, if this works properly, what we can do with this little experiment here is I'm going to pour some water in the side of our little experiment here. So that's going to simulate a recharge zone in the Great Artesian Basin. And very much like today, when water falls in these recharge zones, it's where it sinks into and it seeps underneath and fills up the basin. So we're going to pour just a tiny bit of water here into the side of our basin. Okay, so we've just simulated some rain. Now obviously what we're showing you here is massively sped up. This process of filling up the basin takes millions of years for the water to make its way all the way down into the basin. But what should happen is if we keep just gently topping up this recharge zone, there's some water slip, there we go, just down the bottom there. We can see that water starting to slip around the front of that alfoil. Yet if we look on top, we've still got dry soil. So that's exactly how the Great Artesian Basin works. And the best thing is that water is now locked underground. It's not going to evaporate, it's not going to go anywhere. It's stored inside the basin, and then it can be accessed later on at all these little towns and pumped up out of the ground for a whole bunch of different purposes. Now they reckon that there's about 20 million litres of water in a Great Artesian Basin. Now that is a staggering figure, because if you were to take all of that water, pump it all out and spread it evenly across all of the land masses of the planet, so every single continent, all the land masses, there would be so much water that every piece of land on Earth would be covered in about half a metre of water. So you can get an idea of just how much water is locked up in that basin.
Well, knowing that we've been stuck in town for a few days, it was time to get to work on doing some maintenance on the cars and the vans, fixing up any little issues that we'd had a chance to find, and just take a breather and relax for a bit. Obviously, in any of these outback towns, one of the places you really can't go past is the local bakery. One of the really great places to get any local knowledge in any of these outback areas that you visit is your information centres. They're always staffed by really friendly people, and they have a lot of local knowledge around tracks and just tourist destinations that you can visit in any of these little tiny towns. So definitely check them out when you're going through, particularly if you've got some time to have a look around the local area and find some of the more less explored tourist attractions. With the hotel being really the only place to get a dinner and a drink in Birdsville, you can imagine that it sees plenty of traffic, particularly at this time of the year. Well, with the roads starting to dry up, we had a nice final night and then headed out to Big Red the next morning to check out one of the most iconic four-wheel driving dunes that you could find. At over 30 metres tall, Big Red provides several different challenge tracks that you can really test your four-wheel drive out on and just see how well they handle these dunes. As you could probably imagine, the camera does not show you just how big this dune is. It is an awesome challenge to drive up this thing, so it was time to start getting cars down and seeing what we could do.
said, no, I won't need the winch.
Well, practice makes perfect, and we obviously didn't want to damage anything by hitting it too fast. So, a bit more experimenting, and we were starting to tune in just how fast we needed to hit this thing.
Launch it, Jeffrey, launch it.
Well, there you go. With the last bit of fun out of the way, it would start to plan our trip back towards the other two corners. From here, we wanted to hit Haddon's Corner and Cameron's Corner. The only problem was we were told that the roads were in very questionable condition after the rain, and we honestly weren't sure whether or not we would make it through. Might be looking at this going, well, that doesn't really look that bad. It's a little bit of water on the road, nothing to worry about. Well, it's not really that simple when you're out here. The fact is, as soon as you get any moisture at all on this surface, it creates a dry, hard top and a really, really soft bottom. And it didn't take us long to find out one little accident and you could get yourself seriously stuck.
Still got to pull the van through it.
They don't joke around when they say if you get a truck stuck out here, you got to wait till it dries out before you can even attempt to move the thing.
Sir, you have done a bogged.
This is the perfect example here. Dry, innocent looking soil, but as soon as you hit it, you just sink down and get absolutely stuck. It was this that made us all stop and have a think about the reports that we'd heard back in Birdsville of the conditions of the different tracks heading down to the other corners. And we had to make a serious decision about whether we would attempt these tracks and potentially get stuck for days in sections that were simply impassable due to the rain. In the end, with time against us, we decided that instead of turning south along Arrowbury Road and heading towards the second corner, we would make some detours on our way back and stop via Windora, heading down from there to Eromanga to check out the little local dinosaur museum. From there, we would then move on to Quilpie. From Quilpie, we'd head all the way down to Yowa, across to Yulo, and then off to our farm stay at Dirrabandi, which we were all really looking forward to by this time.
Well, here we are. We're just outside of Cooper's Creek, which is a couple of k's out of Windora. We've stopped here, free camping for the night. It's quite a nice spot here, right next to the river. Unfortunately, we've had a bit of rain recently, so this whole area has just become clay. But anyway, what it is a perfect opportunity to do a little bit of a cooking segment. Now, I know these have been a bit of a meme for the last couple of videos, but we're going to start with something really simple and basic tonight. Something that you can cook up on the road, anywhere. All you're going to need is a couple of simple ingredients and a fireplace. And I thought that no matter, what better recipe to do for our big Outback adventure than a very traditional Outback feed. So what are we going to make this afternoon? What we're going to do is we're going to do a bit of a traditional Australian damper. It's about as simple as damper can get. And the great thing about this recipe is how much you can tweak it to your liking. You only need a couple of base ingredients, but you can throw in almost anything that you find in your caravan or your camper, and it's going to make it even better. So let's get cracking. So what do you actually need to cook the simplest damper possible? Well, you need three things. You need some self-raising flour, you need a little bit of salt in any kind of variety, and some water, and that is it. Now, we found a pack of sultanas in the caravan, so we're going to throw those in as well just to spice it up a little bit. And that's the best thing about this recipe, is you can add kind of almost anything you find in your van or camper, and it's going to make it that little bit better. Now, the other good thing about a damper is that there's 100 different ways you can cook the thing as well, whether or not you want to just wrap it up in some alfoil, chuck it on a fire. You can even stick it on a stick and just roast it over the top. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can do it. What we're going to do though is we're going to use our cast iron oven, and we've got a little, I think they're called a trivet, in the bottom. That's just going to help keep the damper off the bottom so it doesn't burn. We're going to give it a little nice wrapping of alfoil over the top of that, and then we've got some coals in the fire later. We're going to get it going.
Now you have to apologise here. We had a bit of a camera issue, and I don't seem to have the footage of actually making the thing. So you're just going to have to imagine me rolling the dough into the actual damper itself. The key when you're making a damper, though, is when you're kneading the dough, you don't actually want to go too crazy and knead it for too long, because that's going to give you a very cake-like interior to your damper. And if you want the more traditional fluffy damper, you want to kind of just knead it into shape and don't do anything more. This allows the air to kind of stay inside the dough, and it gives you a nice fluffy texture once it's done and cooked.
Once your fire's nice and built up, you got some coals, we're ready to get that Dutch oven over here into the fire. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a nice little base of coals first. So I'm going to get some nice right out of the middle of the fire. Try not to destroy it too much. You can pop your Dutch oven just down there. And then what you're going to do, get some more. Some here we prepared earlier. Beautiful. We're just going to layer them on top here as well so we get some nice even heating over this thing. Now what you want to do is you want to leave that for about half an hour. You can check it occasionally. You know your damper's done when it's got a nice golden brown covering on it. What you can also do, it's good to know with these Dutch ovens, is they're actually really quite good at holding moisture. So if you want a super crispy damper, what you can do is you can crack the lid on your oven, use a little bit of wire or something like that. That's going to let all the steam out. It's going to give you a really, really crispy damper if you want to go down that route. But let's leave this for a while and see how it turns out. proof is on the inside. Yep. It's quite good.
Our next stop was the Eromanga Natural History Museum, which we're really looking forward to checking out. It's got some of the best examples of dinosaurs and dinosaur bones in Australia, and there's a lot of really high quality research that goes on here throughout the year by a bunch of very dedicated individuals. It was fantastic to see the actual collection inside the workshops that they had here. These weren't fake bones that were just on copies of them that were on display in a museum. We're actually getting to see the real bones themselves, and the scale was absolutely incredible. I tell you what, the work involved in actually preparing some of this stuff once it comes out of the ground, it's all extremely interesting. So if you are ever near it, go and check out and do the tour at the Eromanga Natural History Museum. Well, with a quick stop by a lovely local lookout, our next stop was Yawa. With a small town with a population of 142, it's known as the Living Gallery of Oak Country and is extremely popular with fossickers. We were also lucky enough to find the local hot Artesian spa, and I can tell you what, after having driven all day, it was looking mighty fine to sit back and have a bit of a relax in the water.
Hot Artesian spa in the middle of nowhere. Not too bad.
A quick look around the town, I even found a house I might even be able to afford. Well, our next overnight stop was at Yulo. We pulled up outside the town and we had a chance to check out some of the local stores. I managed to pick up a bunch of stuff from this little local leather shop, all handmade, Australian made. It was really good quality product.
So a bit of a stop off in Cunnamulla on the way to Dirranbandi, which is where our last destination is. This place, oh my God, is so busy at the moment. There's got to be half of the vanning population of Queensland coming through the town at the moment. It's a lovely little place, Cunnamulla. It kind of formed out of a Cobb & Co stopover in the late 19th century. And there was a couple of stock routes intersecting and some reliable water sources, and the town just kind of grew from there into what it is today.
Well, we'd made it to Dirranbandi, which was our last main stop of the trip, and we had a fantastic farm stay lined up for us by one of the members of the Wheel Life Club. Some of us even got the opportunity to stay in the temporary accommodation at the farm, which was a nice upgrade from the tents that some of us were used to using for the trip. Well, after what was a really good night rest, we had the opportunity to catch up with the owner of this particular property and were lucky enough to get a whole day tour essentially around this cattle property. We got to check out the old homestead, which was just incredible to see. It obviously wasn't being lived in anymore. They'd upgraded to a newer residence, but seeing the old setup with the old generator rooms and old houses and outhouses was absolutely fascinating.
Black one with a white face is Hereford Angus Cross.
Yep.
Same again with a little white speckly face fella looking at you, or not speckly, but
yeah,
patchwork. The Shorthorn is that fella with a similar to that guy there.
Yeah, with
over the back there.
black and the brown.
Okay, see the grey fellas?
Yeah.
They would be a Charolais Angus cross.
Wow.
Oh wow. That'd be an interesting meat.
Yeah. Lots of cases.
Now referring back to the great Artesian Basin, and obviously all these cattle require an enormous amount of water to keep up. Now, it's actually not for the crops. You don't use this bore water for growing crops. It's actually just to give the cattle something to drink in the feedlots and out in the fields. And at the cost of a small home back here in Brisbane, these bores are not particularly cheap to put in, but the benefit for the farmers over the long term is absolutely incredible. It was also fascinating to learn some of the tricks of the trade when there goes to growing out here. We were doing some moisture testing out in the fields, and even though it looked dry on the surface, when you started to dig down, you could actually see that there was a water layer below the surface that all of these crops were using to grow.
So that tells me that there's 4 foot of
wow.
And there's no joke, when you've got several thousand cattle that need feeding, it becomes quite an operation. The cottonseed that you can see being delivered here was only one of the many ingredients that were mixed together for these feed cattle.
Sort of.
Tell you what, once it's all mixed up, it makes a really impressive food. Really, it is incredible how much work goes into making sure that us city folk can get the best cut of beef possible. Well, after an exceptionally informative and interesting day out on the farm, it was time to head up to the farmstead, where I spotted a nice project car. I guess I can dream, can't I? Anyway, we got to catch up with some of the newest additions to the farm. Cute little things.
Like my size.
And then it was time to do some of our final awards and just a bit of a debrief as a team. And just highlight some of the fun that we'd had while we were away on the trip. Well, with the formalities out of the way, it was time to sit around a fire and reflect on what was an absolutely epic adventure. If you ever find time, I highly recommend you get out, check out the Simpson Desert, go and check out the different corners of the Queensland state. You will not be disappointed. A massive shout out to the group at Wheel Life Full Driving for having us along with this trip and being just an absolute top group. Guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, please chuck them down below in the comments. We'll try and get to them. And if you can like, share, and subscribe this video, it'll help us grow the channel and do more epic adventures like this. Thanks, guys. Until next time with Driving with Doug.